it was just so hype. It was crazy. It was just a packed train. It wasn't even like quiet or anything. We're just like walking through with our little vlog camera and a laptop, opening capsules like little gambling addicts. But everyone just kept saying, yeah, Greyhound, easy 03. They always go 03. We want to be putting Oz like on the map properly. People who are like thinking we're gatekeeping all these international opportunities is just the silliest argument. You want these opportunities? Fucking beat us.
This is In Retrospect with Alistair, who is an Australian AWPer, obviously most notable for his time in Grayhound, played in teams like Renegades as well as Order, and a couple of other more notable ones within the ANZ scene. And he's also, I would argue, Australia's most fashionable and loudest Counter-Strike pro. So what would you have to say to start things off here, Ali? Do you reckon you're up there with both of those?
I'm definitely the most loudest, but there's definitely been some fashionable hunks around.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. Look, where I want to start things with you, honestly, I'm sure it started before this, but for me, where I first sort of saw you and where you first kind of came onto my radar, and I think actually a lot of people's radars, was the Corvide roster that you played in. If you remember, this one was obviously yourself, Urcast, Gratisfaction, Inns, and Steege. And at the time, I think obviously people were like, all right, this is an okay team, but we didn't really know where a lot of those players would end up going in their careers. But when you look at where those players have kind of all gone, every single one of those individuals has gone on to do some pretty impressive things within esports, and for the majority of you, obviously, in Counter-Strike. But what did you guys think when you made that team? Like, was this one of the first kind of proper teams that you were in? Because it was one of the first ones where I felt like you guys really all sort of broke out as a core.
Yeah, it wasn't even the role I sort of wanted to play back then as well. I think like when I was younger, I always wanted to start teams and build teams like with friends and all that stuff. But Corvide was definitely the first real project, I guess. I can't remember who introduced me. It might have been Josh. In's like kind of bringing me along. It kind of really came together, I think, when we got Gratisfaction, because I was definitely hesitant if he was going to actually join. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to play unless he came along, and then he did in the end. And I think our first LAN was actually quite a success, all things considered.
Yeah, that first time, was that the Cybergamer LAN?
Yeah, the first Sydney LAN, first first nationals. For I think all of us actually, for all five of us.
Was there, I can't remember exactly the result there, but I remember it being like quite good, and that's why I remember this event. Was it a top 4 or was it a top 8 or something like that?
I think, this is where it gets kind of hazy, but I think it was a top 4 and we beat Legacy. And then we just got absolutely tramped in like the semis on stage. But like getting to beat Legacy, I think it was like Lightstep and then some other quite big names at the time. It was like a pretty like studded roster, I think, at the time, and we actually upset them, which was cool.
Yeah, so obviously that was like a big one, and I think that's where this Corvide roster really kind of came out, and a lot of you from there sort of sped up a little bit, so to speak. So look, I don't want to touch too much more on the Corvide era, because I don't want to go into the nitty gritty necessarily until we get a little bit deeper into your career, where people kind of really want to hear that sort of stuff. But one of the other sort of first interesting moments that you guys played in was when you went overseas with Chiefs at the ESEA Global Challenge Season 22 finals, or whatever it was called back then. And this was Alistair, Inns, Malta, Tux, Lightstep. So you do still sort of have this cooperation, I suppose, with Inns, and now you've found yourself in this new team, and you've got a couple of bigger names in there as well. But one of the things from this event, obviously, I don't know if you remember this, but everyone was like, oh, this Alistair chick's really good. And then obviously this hashtag not a girl thing came up. So what was the whole situation behind that?
God, I think I just had really long hair and probably a pretty soft, delicate face back then. I think it all sparked from a clip on like a Tarek stream where they were like talking about how Echo Fox with Sean Gers and Roka and all that stuff. And they're like, oh, they're versing a girl. And then they all like sort of jumped on like, what's wrong with that? Like all that stuff. And they were talking about me. I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely remember that meme.
Do you remember, like, did you play? I think you played pretty well at that event as well. That was kind of like part of the thing, was that like you were kind of popping off.
Yeah, I can't remember the later games. I remember the first game I played was against Echo Fox, first international game, and I dropped 30, and we lost, I think, 16-12 or 16-13, something like that. It was actually really tight, and I don't know, at the time I remember I just wasn't missing somehow. I was just always in the right spot, like almost by chance and luck at times, but it was definitely like a comfortable game for me.
Yeah, sometimes just like that, but I guess
Yeah.
we can talk about some more of those kind of instances that later on in your career we go. But I want to touch as well on IEM Sydney 2017, and this is where things will probably start to get a little bit more in depth. And obviously for you, and I think for Australian Counter-Strike in particular, IEM Sydney 2017 was a really big moment. And at that time, you were playing on the Chiefs, which was yourself, Ins, Multipex, and Tuck. So still very much the continuation of the same Chiefs that you played at the ESEA Global Challenge with. You did just replace Lightstep with Pex, and you came into this event. And you were the one Australian representative at this event. This was kind of like the first tier 1 event that you had played, and sort of the first tier 1 event that like almost maybe I would say the newer generation of Counter-Strike players had played, beyond the likes of Vox and Immunity and those kinds of names. So a big moment for you guys, and going into this Australis game, everyone was like, okay, they're going to get shit on, which you ultimately did get shit on in that game. I think it was something like 16-2, if I remember rightly. But
I think it was 16-5. I think that was the score. Yeah, it was rough.
Much of a muchness, really, at that point. But what did you guys actually feel after that game? Because I remember having conversations, and I brought this up a lot when I'm talking about when I see a new Australian team or a new like local domestic team kind of going over and playing in a tier 1 event for the first time. I always remember back to that moment where I was speaking with one of you guys. I can't remember who it was at the time, but you were sort of saying like we didn't really realize how big of a gap, or maybe how strong these kind of teams really are. Like you felt like you learned a lot at that one particular map. Was it Inferno? I can't really remember, but yeah, it felt like you guys sort of had a bit of an awakening, maybe.
Yeah, I think like when you get pounded like for the first proper time against a team, and it doesn't even feel like they're just sharper than you, like they're actually just outplaying you and just booking you like at every point, like it makes you realize like how far the skill disparity is. And that would have definitely been a moment, because we wouldn't have played like that much top competition. Like even if we go back to like that ESL MDL or ECA MDL LAN, like we weren't versing like top tier teams, you know what I mean? It was like tier 2, tier 3 American teams and mixed European teams. So like getting to verse like a class team like Australis, you definitely feel like their power and just them shitting on you, like how much better they are. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, then obviously you go on to have actually quite a pretty good run at this event. We're talking about the first game here against Renegades, which, I think a lot of people kind of forget about this game because it's kind of overshadowed almost by the North upset that you guys were able to achieve at IEM Sydney 2017. But the game against Renegades, you won 16-5. It was on train. And what was obviously quite interesting about this one was like you guys are a local domestic ANZ team. And everyone's sort of like, okay, well, Renegades is the best ANZ team, and these Chiefs guys, they're probably just going to get shit on, and they're just like the local invite, whatever. Who cares about them? And then you go out and you beat the Renegades roster, and people are kind of like, oh. And I think this, first of all, was a bit of a rude awakening for the Renegades team at the time, because they were a bit like, oh shit, like, yeah, we are the best, but we're not like, we can't just like cruise through it necessarily. And then for you guys, it was kind of like, okay, we can actually do this. So what was this kind of game like from your perspective?
I remember it was on train. I think we started CT. It was either 14-1 or 15-0 at the half, and we were like gunning for that 16-0 by the time it's like 13-0 and shit. Like, we're going to fucking do this. I remember Josh was just absolutely pounding ass. He was like lurking. He was just finding himself in really good situations. And I don't know, we just felt comfortable, confident, like all of that just all came together. We just trusted each other, and like, we just knew what we were doing. We didn't really care about who we were versing and whether it was like, the proper Australian #1 team and stuff like that. We were just playing CS, and yeah, I mean, that's just how it can be at times, and we just ended up pounding them.
Was Train a good map for you guys? I feel like I remember a story around Train being pretty good for you, and maybe they didn't really play a lot of Train or something like that.
Yeah, I was definitely comfortable on Train. I think I was a bit of an unorthodox AWPer on it, because I would just jump from like train to train. I was definitely like, I don't know, it's like when I look back at those games, I definitely had like ants in my pants, and I would probably think a lot less and just rely so much more on my aim. And train, I would just jump around like a playground sort of thing. I was just comfortable in it.
Yeah, you were always one of those kinds of AWPers who was like very, very mobile, and people sort of enjoyed watching, and like very flashy. And even to an extent, you kind of still have some of those elements, I think, when you're feeling it. But
yeah.
We'll talk about the North Chiefs upset, because this was the big one, right? So first of all, you beat Renegades. That's already starting to get people a little bit interested. But 16-13 against North. And if I remember rightly, that was also on train. I could be wrong. But the team was MSL, Config, Cajun, AZ, and Magisk. And this was kind of, I think, the first result where I felt like people started to care about teams that were not Vox or Immunity from the ANZ region. Because again, going into this, people didn't really care about ANZ as a region. There hadn't been that much excitement. And even the excitement around ANZ region had been like, okay, Vox has done well. Immunity's kind of there. We had Crown 55k. Again, that was Vox Immunity. It was all Vox Immunity up until this point.
Yeah.
But what was it that sort of made it possible for you guys to actually beat a team like North? Were they having a bad day? Were you guys all peaking at the same time? Was, like you said, Inns was pounding ass. Was that still the case?
Yeah, Josh definitely pounded ass more on that game as well. We were down 10-5 going into T-side nuke, and we had this one strat that we would just run, and we had variations off it. Nobody had really like seen it, but we'd pretty much just throw a lurk smoke out door, and it would land like kind of in front of door and hut. And at the time, teams didn't really know how to play around it, and we were just a really structured, methodical team, and that was like kind of Tux's call style, and it kind of like everyone just sort of came together to play really well, and everyone had their moment in that game. I remember Pex had a Deagle moment, Josh was just legit not missing, like it was just crazy, and they just didn't really know how to deal with like that one strat that we had like 3 or 4 different plays off of. I remember we were just going unders, we're going ramps, we're going outside off it, and then we'd commit out top with it, and we just clawed it back from 10-5, which was, you know, not only hard as an underdog, but like hard to do on like nuke.
Yeah, what was the sort of ramifications of that result? Because I remember the North team in particular didn't seem very pleased about it, as you can imagine, and I don't recall that we really saw much from North after that result. But
yeah,
you guys had a lot of like, what's the word? Positive zeitgeist, I suppose. You know, people were talking about Chiefs, were excited about Chiefs. You were essentially one game away from progressing as well. Obviously, we know that that didn't quite work out when you played against Optic, and I think that might have been the train game that I'm thinking about, where you lost 16-4.
Yeah, that was sad. We got to play Optic twice. Can't remember if we played the same map twice, because we were just like, no, we could try it this time, and they were just schooling us. That was like another time where it felt like they didn't even have to play good as a team. They were just kind of good individuals just destroying us both times. You know, I think it was like Tarek and Mixwell and stuff like that, I think, at the time, and they were just outplaying us legit, nice and easy.
What are your thoughts on that as like a concept? Because I see this a lot of the time, and even, you know, even for yourself sometimes, right? When you're playing domestically, basically what I'm trying to get is like when you're in a situation where as the favorite team, you're potentially going to be upset by an underdog. It seems like these favorite teams, like the better teams, just kind of like are able to switch it on when it really matters. Like when it's like maybe let's say an upper bracket final or something. Yeah, like whatever, you know, you end up losing that. It's like, okay, we go down to the lower bracket, but then the lower bracket runs like, yeah, you can tell that this team is just going to win. So do you guys feel that when you're playing domestically? Do you feel that when you're playing internationally as the underdogs, if that makes sense? Like for example, let's say maybe this B&E game that you guys played fairly recently at Dreamhack Melbourne, it looks like you're going to win. It looks like you're going to get the upset. And then this quote-unquote favorite team just turns it on. And like, you know, you'll probably say from your perspective, oh, we played poorly, this and that. But like, surely there's a little bit of them as well kicking it into another gear.
Yeah, I think it's just comfort. Like they just have been in situations where they know, like if we go overseas and we play international competition, they know they're the favorites. They know realistically they should be better than us. Like that's how it works if you're the underdog on the other side. And it's the same when we're playing domestically. Like sometimes it'll get dicey, whether it's with Vertex or Rooster, but the back of our head, like we're still, regardless of the scoreline, like so damn confident. And I think that goes such a long way in Counter-Strike. So it's cooked. Like, you know, we feel that in Australia, but then international teams feel that against us. Like I know they would. So I think that goes a long way, and they just have all that experience and confidence, even when their like backs are against the wall.
Do you think that's more important in Counter-Strike 2 as well, with the way that the game plays a little bit, like this heavy swing mentality?
Yeah, with swinging and like, I wouldn't say relying on your aim so much, but it's definitely going to come down to some like nitty-gritty aim jewels. It's going to go like a long way.
All right, well, we'll get into that a little bit later on when we do talk a little bit more in depth about Counter-Strike 2, but we'll keep progressing through the timeline here. And another one of the key points in your career, I feel like, has been when you joined Order, which was, at the time, it was yourself, Hatz, Liazz, Sico, and EMAG. So again, what I really appreciate about your career in particular is I feel like you played with a lot of the players that you currently play with. on your journey through, where some players didn't necessarily have that kind of luxury, but you forged these kind of early relationships with players like Inns, with players like Liazz, with players like Sico. Obviously Hatz as well was in the team for quite a while, and you played with him on both Order and on Renegades / Grayhound. So let's talk a little bit about this thing. The first question that I actually have here for you in regards to this one is this sort of role clash. I remember at the time that it was like a perceived role clash with Sico in particular, because again, you're both AWPers. I think you came into the team as a rifler. He stayed as the AWPer. Obviously, the same thing ended up happening when you joined the Renegades roster. He was AWPing. Yep. You were rifling. Now you're AWPing. He's rifling. So this whole thing has kind of gone through your entire career. But is this perceived role clash as bad as it seems maybe on paper, or as bad as people make it out to be? Or is it just, you're both comfortable rifling anyway?
Well, I think Simon, like Sico, is definitely a better rifler than I am. That's like hence why it kind of always panned out how it did, where I'd end up AWPing. It's kind of hard in Australia because we're not afforded like the same luxuries as Europe, where there's so much wide talent pool to pick from. You could get like a really like a good AWPer to play as a rifler, or you could get like a decent rifler to fill that role. So like that's why I kind of slotted in, is like they would prefer me to kind of join that team with how well everyone got along, and like I guess my understanding of the game. They would rather that than just to pick up like a sharp rifler who maybe wouldn't mesh well and would have like kind of a lot of experience together along the way.
Well, one of the big events again that you played there, and I'm sure we're going to keep talking about IEMs, and IEM Sydney obviously 2018, and this is where the one where you played with Order. So again, Mr. Two-Time, and you know what's coming. We'll talk about it in a second. But first, we have to sort of get the context out of the way. You lost 4-16 to FaZe in the upper bracket, whatever, best of one. Probably you were one of the lower seeded teams. Probably they were one of the higher seeded teams. This is what happens to ANZ teams at this point. Then you go on to play Legacy, and this was one of those weird situations where I'm pretty sure Legacy like wasn't even really meant to be there.
No,
but they got like some sort of
pulled out and they got invited.
Yeah, so you get a bit of a freebie there, but hey, I mean, you go one step further in an IEM event. Can't really complain about that. 2-0 over Legacy was always the expectation for a team like Order. But this infamous Cloud9 game, and you lost 1-2 against Cloud9, which in reality could have been a victory. Could have very easily been a victory. There was the Rush 1 versus 4. So I did this with Hatz, and I want to do it with you as well. I want you to talk me through what you felt and what you were thinking when Rush was 1v4ing you and you were watching or playing in the game at that point.
Yeah. So I remember it like so clearly. It's actually ridiculous. Like probably not many moments in my career where I would like actually be able to play out around so well in my head. But basically it was me and Simon retaking from Nana. Sico, and I believe it was Emag and Hatz retaking from CT. We didn't know what gun he had. He planted on B, and then we knew he like started fighting us in Nana, and in reality, like I think just swinging would have been the best option. Just like bloody fucking swing. He's not going to be able to kill both of us. I think I died first, and in all the mayhem, I was telling Simon to I was like, jump around, like try and bait a bullet and then peek. And I probably didn't word it as good as I could have, because I think Simon just jumped up on the spot and just got plucked out of the sky. And I was like, oh, fuck, it's happening. It's all falling apart. And like, even then, it's still not like that easy for him to win it. Like, I mean, it's 1v2, and you've got an AWP. Like, it's not hard, but it's not easy at all. And I believe like Jordan just tapped the bomb, or he went to sit it, and Emac was ready to swing off him CT. And he literally just peeked, killed him, and got away. And then that was it. I knew it was like 1v1. It's fucking impossible. We don't have any util. And I think it was 15-13. And for us. So then they just ended up winning that, and they went on to win an OT, even with Liazz like having an absolute blinder of a series. I think he dropped like 40 kills throughout, and that was so fucking sad. That was really sad.
Yeah, I think your recollection is pretty good, because the scoreline was either 15-13 or 15-12, something like that. Yeah. But also it was you and Sico in Banana, and it was Emag and Hatz coming in from CT.
There you go.
I've watched this clip a few times, obviously, when I've been preparing for these kinds of interviews, and the one image that's in my mind is when Sico, he's like behind the half wall and he just jumps up and just gets absolutely booked, and it's
that was my calm. I remember it, and like he didn't even blame me for it or anything, which was like really good and stuff, like as his teammate, but it was just sad.
Yeah, it happens though, and I guess for you and for your teammates, a fairly formative moment in your career. Has it ever like did it teach you anything? Did it make you think about the game in a different way? Did you ever sort of have any sort of fallout from it or anything like that?
No, I think it probably would have hurt a lot more if they were a better team or had better results later in that event. I think that was like a weird C9 where they might have had like FNS or had Slimmy or something like that. It was a really weird team. Um, but I mean it just kind of goes to show it's not over till it's over, like no
Hmm.
matter the scoreline sort of shit,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the sad part about that was that, like, obviously, you guys would have then, if you would have won that, I think you would have been one game away from making the stage. And on the other side of the bracket, Grayhound sort of narrowly lost to FaZe as well. And if they would have won that, they
Yeah,
would have played against you. So it was like guaranteed one
that would
team
have
to
been
go
crazy.
through to the stage. But hey, what can happen? But
Alternate universe.
yeah, yeah. So look, we'll speed up a little bit here in terms of moving through your career because for you, I felt like it actually kind of took you a long time to get to the point where you obviously got into Greyhound, you got into Renegades, and you were able to start going overseas and have some of these more sort of interesting tournaments to talk about because it's like a lot of things like ANZ champs and a lot of qualifiers and this and that. But one thing I wanted to sort of touch on before we got into the Renegades talk was how COVID sort of impacted things for you because I remember we had this storyline and you probably remember from the one episode of Geographically Challenged that we did with you, which was very early on. Maybe this was like 3 or 4 years ago now. I think it was just after you might have qualified for a minor. And the storyline was like, Alistair is the best Australian player to have never played at a minor. And at the time, you hadn't played a minor. For whatever reason, you just weren't in the teams that qualified. And
Yeah.
then you qualified for this minor, and then this minor got cancelled. And it was just like, for
Yeah.
fuck's sake. So
Yeah.
how's COVID impact on your career been like? And obviously qualifying for the major and then not qualifying and not being qualifying and then not being able to play. What were your experiences playing through COVID and dealing with that whole sort of situation
COVID
prior
was
to
a
the
weird time.
Renegades call up?
Yeah. So I think I was in order at the time playing with like Gyra, like Ustilo, like even like Emag might have even made an appearance at the start of COVID. It's all kind of got wishy-washy, but it was just such a grim time. Like especially if you were in Melbourne. I think Melbourne copped a lot of like
Mm.
COVID pretty hard, like Victoria and stuff with all the rules and regulations. And you'd think it'd make you play CS like a lot more, which it did a little bit, but it wasn't nice. Like we couldn't see friends, we couldn't even get haircuts. And for me, like Counter Strike, I need to have like a really good balance. I think outside to be able to feel good in the game as well. Like just forcing myself to play is never going to feel good. And I couldn't gym, I couldn't see friends, I couldn't do anything but sit there and just pug all day. So I think we were just playing lots of online tourneys at the time. Like that was when like there was heaps of ESL events and stuff like that. You could just play one after the other. Um, and we came close a couple of times, nearly beating Greyhound. We should have beat them in one of I guess it was like RMRs or whatever it was called back then. Um, but we just never did. And it was just such a grim time for CS. We were just playing for the sake
Yep.
of it felt.
Yeah. I mean, I want to talk about frustration, obviously, not only because of the fact that, yeah, you're playing in this order roster and you're getting close and you're never really quite doing it. There's like the battle for second, really, with Avant at the time was kind of the big storyline there. But also, I think, I don't know this for a fact, but is there an element for you as an individual in your career where there was like maybe some frustration about not getting the call up to join the Renegades/Greyhound roster? Because I felt like, you were one of those players that was like constantly considered, right? In conversations that I've had with other players when they've joined the team at the time, maybe it was Greyhound or whatever, I said, was there anyone, that like you were sort of vying for the spot with? And a lot of the time, like your name actually does come up, but for whatever reason, like it's Malta or Hatz or whoever came into the team before you is the player that ends up kind of getting picked up. So did you kind of feel that as an individual? Were you annoyed or frustrated by that?
I don't think I was ever frustrated at me not getting picked up. Like it didn't. I always understood. Like it never made sense for me to get picked up when like Sico was in the team. Sico was a really good AWPer and a really good systemic AWPer for them with the way Dexter called and played. So I think the really sad and frustrating parts was literally just seeing like all my best friends and like all my best teammates like getting taken.
Mm-hmm.
That was the really damaging part, I think. So I remember finding out when Liazz got the call up from like Renegades and stuff like that, and we were still screaming, and I was just like depressed because I was happy for him, but I was like, yeah, that's like he's gone. And then I remember it happening with Ins and then Hatz, and it was just like you can only go through it so many times, and it's just so sad. I think by the end of it, I was just like, yeah. Just like, I was always happy for them, always was, but it just, I think that was just like, it's the curse in Oz and smaller regions where if you're that number 2 team, you're just gonna get fucked so much by like that top team just plucking all the talent whenever they want. Because it's not like they're just building their roster; they're also damaging the team that's kind of like second in line.
Yep. Did you ever wonder if like will it ever come? Like, did you ever wonder that maybe you would never actually get that call up, and it would like the timing would never line up, it would never be right, and you'd always be sort of in this quote unquote feeder team, and like, you know, you've in a sense, like as far as ANZ CS is concerned, if you make it into order and you're the second best team in the region, like you've made it in comparison to like 99% of Counter-Strike players in this region.
Yeah.
So you've still done well, but it's like almost you're not quite like catching that dream almost.
To be honest, I never had the mentality of wanting them to kind of pick me up. I just wanted the team I was in to win. I just wanted to knock them off rather than like wait for the opportunity for them to call me up. Because there were times where definitely felt like we were within reach of like winning like some series and events like that. But you know, I never really focused on them trying to pick me up, I think.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, I guess we'll get to the point then where you do actually, in the end, get picked up. And I just want to sort of mark in your history a little bit here, the time that you had with Order, which was 628 maps, which is an insane amount of maps of Counter-Strike. Because if we look at you so far with Grayhound and Renegades, and I think I made this stat before IEM Sydney, so it probably is a little bit off now, but you played 279 with the Renegades Grayhound core. So, you know, just take that into context. And I think also the time period was roughly the same. So it's been about, it would have been about 3 years or so, something like that with Order, maybe a little bit less. And it's also kind of been, you know, maybe almost 3 years with Renegades. So you were playing a shit ton of games. And this is what I'm talking about when I was sort of referencing your history with Order. There's like a lot of games of Counter-Strike, but a lot of them are like not meaningless Counter-Strike, but they're not like, you know, they're not big games. They're just like ANZ champs, regular season, ESEA, probably some this or that online, something which no one really cares about too much. But you go into this Order roster and you play a lot of games of Counter-Strike, so I just thought it was an interesting stat. But what was it like kind of departing a team that you'd been with for so long?
I mean, obviously it was hard and everyone was really happy and excited for me. But I think by that point, like I'd kind of lost like all my best friends in those rosters, so it wasn't like difficult. Obviously, I was close with Jira, Ustilo, Valiant, and all that. We all got along like really well and stuff like that. But I think like it was way more hard when I would see Ins and then Liazz and even EMAG and stuff like that and Hatz like all depart slowly as well. Like that was kind of tough, but I was just so excited to be getting like, I guess, a shot because I didn't really realize like the weight of it until it kind of approached me. And then, it just felt like everything was taking off when I got that call up.
You know, that's funny that you should mention that because that is something that I'm pretty sure Hatz said the same thing when I was talking to him doing his in retrospect. He sort of said, like, you know, when you're playing in Order, for example, you're not really focusing on what Grayhound is up to and you're not thinking about, oh, they're going to go overseas every couple of months or every month or something like that. But then as soon as you get picked up, it's like, boom, you're straight over playing it. Like, I don't know for you what the first event was. I've probably got it written down. But for him, I think it was Katowice. One of the Katowices, maybe 2020 or something, like 2021, I don't know, whatever. But it doesn't really matter. But like you're going from playing like domestic CS to like straight away your first event is like one of the biggest tier 1 events in the world. So was that kind of like a big awakening for you where you were like, holy shit, like actually this is the life that they live?
Yeah, I think so. It was more so like we definitely had random opportunities throughout our careers, like in Chiefs and Order, where we would get to experience like this, like T1 event. We did pro leagues and like other random events like that, where we would get a taste of it. But then when I joined this team, I didn't realize like how often and how much they got to do it and experience this level of practice and competition.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to sort of touch on as well how the team operated when you joined, because you actually replaced Dexter, which, first of all, that's not a like-for-like replacement, right? You're an AWPer. You're positionally sometimes can be considered a star player in your previous teams and stuff like that. And then Dexter's obviously an in-game leader. He's a rifler. How does that initial sort of setup work? Because again, this is the Sico x Alistair clash, but also not only that, they've also lost their in-game leader, and even prior to that as well, only a few months beforehand, they'd lost their coach, which was Mitha. So when I look at that team, and I think even you're still kind of seeing the ramifications of it with Grayhound almost to this day, it felt like at the time, you know, it was very much Dexter's team. Now it's like, okay, at that point in time, it's like, whose team is it? Right now, it's probably like you would consider like, okay, Inns is the guiding force behind Grayhound. But back then, it was like not a struggle for power necessarily. I don't want to like go and dramatize it like that, but like who slots into all these roles? You know what I mean? If that's the what you get.
Yeah.
You know?
I think like when I first joined, I was just so excited to be there and like be practicing in Europe. I didn't really care, but like when I actually reflect on it, it was kind of like an absolute shit show. Because we didn't really know. We were testing out who was IGLing between Josh and Liam at the time, and we kind of went back and forth a little bit, and we had like this rough. We played like the first proper event was an online pro league, and we played from Malta, and we were on like 60 ping. You know, like that's just not ideal to be playing like tier 1 CS. And we were just kind of chopping and changing, and prac wasn't the greatest. Like I was definitely a little bit like I was just positive because I was just happy to be there and get this opportunity. But for them, they were a bit more used to it, so everyone was a bit sad, and we were away for so long during this whole time. We were away for like 2 months. That's just so much time to be spending away. And eventually, after like testing and trialing everything, we played that first event with, I believe, Liam like IGLing in prac for a little bit, and then we went to Josh IGLing, and I was rifling. Like that was it. And then I think after that, it sort of all kicked off. We probably suck. I think Simon, you'll be a better rifler than Ali's a rifler, and he'll be able to AWP to the same standard you're AWPing at. So it just made sense to swap me to AWPing, and then Josh continued IGLing for a while there. But yeah, it was definitely like a grim time. But I just did not care yet because I was just so happy to be playing all this and getting these opportunities with them.
How do conversations like that go in a team, especially when you're the new joiner, right? Like, are you even really like, are you a voice in the team when like, is there a conversation where people are like, oh, we need to change something? Maybe we should have such and such IGL. It's like, does Alistair even really get a vote at that time, or is there, you know, a conversation going behind closed doors that you're not even involved in? Like, what's that all like?
Well, yeah, I didn't know. Like, it was really hard to try and warm up to all that stuff. Like, I'm definitely somebody I'm gonna kind of like speak my mind if I think it's for the team and if it's the right thing. But it was weird, and with a team of like such passive people, you know what I mean? Like Josh is our IGL, but he's a very passive person, and you know you can't force stuff out of him. He'll speak his mind when he's ready to, and so like it was kind of hard at times. I think we had a big team discussion after like some grim practice. We had it like in one of the hotel rooms, and it was kind of like me talking to Liam, but like the whole team was there, but it was mainly just us two talking about differing visions of the team and stuff like that. And it was just, it was just such a weird time because I was trying to figure out if like, are they going to respect my opinion enough? Because obviously I've just come from like a different team and they've been playing this top competition for a while. But I still like stand by. I think I definitely should have spoke my mind, and I should convey my opinion and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what potentially makes or separates a decent player from like someone that can actually go a little bit further with Counter-Strike, because you might be good in your own individual aspects of the game, but being able to just kind of help the team, mold the team, do this or that, be an extra voice is maybe something that separates a lot of players. But I want to as well touch on your experiences in the Grayhound house. I don't know, like, when did you move into the Grayhound house? Was it like immediate or?
No. So I lived at home. I was also in Melbourne. They were in Melbourne as well. And I think I trialed it out for a little bit, but I just felt like the lifestyle wasn't really for me. I can't remember exactly how long I stayed there. There were definitely points where I think I stayed there for like maybe up to 2 months, or I would come in if we wanted to like practice really hard for an RMR or a boot camp, so I'd stay for like a month, stuff like that. But it just wasn't for me. It was just completely different lifestyles, and you feel yourself like everyone's computers in the same room, so like you just stay up later. Everyone just sits there, chat shit, whatever, and eating habits go out the window. And I just found myself waking up at like 12:30, 1 p.m., which isn't like mentally healthy for me. I think I want to be up early. I want to go to the gym. I want to just go get a coffee and come back to my PC, and it's like 10 a.m., stuff like that. So I felt like it was best for me if I just lived at home and stuff like that. Yeah.
So you never really properly lived. You were always like almost a guest in the house, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a little bit. I tried it out, and I think by that point the house was almost wrapping up, and anyway, But
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually honestly never realized that because I think there was a lot of instances where we did like obviously these remote shows and we would interview you and you would be in the house, and so I just sort of assumed like, oh yeah, Alistair's living at the house, but I guess you were just sort of staying there for whatever that event might have been, or whatever, or playing there for that particular event
Just
or
had
something.
stints here and there, I believe.
All right. Well, one of the other big talking points for your career, of course, would be the first major that you attend. So this was PGL Stockholm, if I remember rightly, the first major that you were able to attend. And now, one weird thing about this was I think the qualification came through the RMR system. So it's obviously a little bit different to how you would like traditionally go. And for example, now you've just played at the Blast Major, for example, the Blast Major, obviously, but also the Blast RMR, where you play at an event, you qualify against the teams, you have that moment where you win, and then you qualify to go to the major, and it's like, this is awesome, fuck yeah. Whereas at this one, if I remember rightly, you guys kind of just got the invite by being like the number one team in ANZ, and you might have had to have beaten a team to get those points, but there wasn't like the moment where it's like, this game is the qualifier game. Is that right? Do you remember that? Because I feel like that takes away a little bit of the specialness, if that makes sense, of qualifying for your first major especially.
I mean, like, when I reflect, it definitely is not as prestigious as beating, like, Mongols and any Asian team to qualify and represent, like, Oceania and Asia for these events. But I remember at the time we played, their name would have, I think it was Encore. They weren't LFO at the time. And we had to play, like, it wasn't RMRs, but it was a few tournaments split up. And we were playing from the house. We boot camped for that event. And there was like a qualifying moment. I think we lost map 1 or the first series. They knocked us into the lower bracket, and then we just said like, fuck this, like, guys, we're playing online against Encore. Let's fucking shift into gear, focus up. And yeah, we just ended up winning. And we have those videos that like Josh makes and uploads to YouTube where it's like the comms and the hype. And we were so hype, like no matter the scoreline, because we knew what was on the line. And it even though we were playing Australian teams and stuff, like just knowing that the major, like we just got to win this series and the major's ours, were there. And it was just so hype. It was crazy. I don't know at what point we stopped screaming after winning every round to where we are now, but like we would scream after winning like an eco.
I mean, it must have been like not only a big moment for you qualifying for your first major, I think it might have been also Hatz's first major, if I remember correctly, because he joined early on in the COVID period as well. And then obviously for all the other guys that may have already been at a major, I can't even remember like if all of them were. Malta probably would have been. I think it was
Malta and Sico had played a major, and me, Inns, and Hatz had not played a major.
Yeah, so
they qualified and had like the RMR stickers, whatever that was, but the event didn't happen, I don't think.
Yeah.
But this was our first proper major, and we got to do it together, which was crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I wanted to actually ask you about as well, because this is like, as you said, like you're really good friends with all these guys and you'd kind of come up in your career with a lot of them. So I wanted to sort of see whether or not there was any like, did it make it extra special, or was it any more memorable because you did it with players like Inns, who, you know, you played in this Corvide roster that we talked about back in the day, like one of your first sort of breakout teams, and Malta you played with a lot in your early career in that Chiefs team as well, and obviously Hatz and Sico were big sort of parts of the order roster at times as well. So was it, you know, a little bit more special because you were playing with those guys that you'd kind of gone on this journey with?
Yeah, it was for sure. It's hard to have everyone under that same, I guess, umbrella. But for me, I think the most special moment was getting to do it with Inns, because I knew where we'd come from together, and we'd actually both got to see how far we've taken this game. Like, it was actually insane. And even seeing where he's at now as a player, like I still look at Inns and I think he's a world-class player. Like, he could be playing in all of Tier 1 Europe consistently, I think. And getting to, you know, start off where we did, to qualifying for our first major, to being here now, like 3-4 majors later, is crazy.
I think I've seen either a video or a photo of you and Hatz, I'm pretty sure, on a train or something. Is this from the first one that you went to, where you were like unboxing stickers, trying to get your stickers or something?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was it was the first one. That was on the way to Stockholm, and we were just we just
like, that just shows you, right?
And it was just a packed train. It wasn't even like quiet or anything. We're just like walking through with our little vlog camera and a laptop, opening capsules like little gambling addicts, just trying to get golds and just get our own stickers. And it was so much fun. There was just so much fun back then with all of it. It was so fresh.
I guess it goes to show you like what qualifying for a major really means for the first time, especially for a player or a team from a region like this, which it's kind of a big deal. But results wise, obviously you go into this one, you beat Payne in a BO1, but ultimately I think you were knocked out by Dexter's Mouse as well, which might have been a little bit extra sad for some of the guys that had played with Dexter. But losing 2-1 in that one, look, I mean, end of the day, do you go away from that major disappointed by maybe not progressing too far, or do you really not care too much because it's like, hey, we still played at a major, like we qualified to our first major. I kind of want to get in the mindset of like what it is like to be as someone, in a competitive environment like that.
Yeah.
Like, does it still hurt or still happy?
Yeah, I think regardless, it always hurts. You can have a close game, you can get pumped regardless. Like a loss is a loss and it fucking hurts. And yeah, there's definitely, they would have had that, it's Dexter, we want to beat him. Everyone's friends, obviously, but this guy left for like a really good team and you want to beat that really good team, no matter who's in it. And we had a big comeback that series. I remember we were down 12-3 on Mirage and we ended up coming back winning 16-14. And then I think we just got wrecked the next 2 maps, which was really sad. But I mean, they were practicing in Europe and everything. Like, we weren't too down, but losses suck no matter what.
What does it feel like to be playing at a major? Does it feel different to playing a normal event?
I think at majors, it feels like there's more of that fairy tale opportunity. That fairy tale run where you can make the stage and you can make it to all these events. Like, look at like the previous ones where you got the top 8 had like Monty, Gamer Legion. I think there was another kind of underdog team, Into the Breach, stuff like that. It's, I don't know. I keep that in the back of my mind, sort of, and it kind of gives me a bit of confidence. But at the same time, like a T1 event is a T1 event. You just have to play the games in front of you. Like, that's it.
Yep. Okay, so one more thing that I wanted to kind of quiz you on was the Ali Liazz bromance, which I feel like I've seen sort of develop over the course of your career. And I don't know if it's not really like it's not really a thing necessarily, or maybe it is. Maybe I'm reading into it too much. I don't know. But what's the deal here, right? Because like, does this just exist in my head, or is like Liazz kind of like one of your favorite teammates to play with?
Yeah, I mean, we just got along so well outside the server. I remember I can't remember, we posted a photo of us like kind of arm in arm, like in the mirror, and it definitely looked like a couple. And I think from that point on, everyone would just say that, yeah, Ali. Everyone would just think I was gay, but nobody said anything about Jay or anything like, yeah, they're in a relationship, whatever, and stuff like that. And like, we recreated that photo a couple years later, and like it kind of kicked it all off again where everyone was like, oh, they're back together or whatever bullshit, and it was just like so funny. But it was just sort of just us mates, like it's whatever. And yeah, I don't even know how that came about, is like the bromance, you know what I mean? We were just like good mates in teams together and stuff like that.
I mean, hey, it could have been a great story, right? It could have been great would you be like if it were a thing, would you be the first couple in a Counter-Strike? I feel like, like there isn't really any, you know what I mean?
I haven't seen anybody that's like, in teams together that have been
should have run with it.
That are together, you know what I mean? Like, it definitely would have been a first.
You got cousins like Hunter and Nico and like brothers and stuff like that, but what about a relationship? Like, that's a new one. I mean, what happens if someone gets kicked from the team? That would be really awkward, but anyway.
And there's bad blood.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll go from like good sides of being in a team to maybe bad sides of being in a team. You talk about bad blood. I don't know if that's necessarily what this is, but obviously these kinds of situations can lead to bad blood. I want to talk about what it's like to replace players or be involved in that process of replacing players in the team. Because I can imagine, obviously, being on the receiving end of being kicked from a team is not a fun scenario. And I've got to say, actually, for you, I don't know, have you ever been kicked from a team? Like maybe earlier on, but like in any of your proper teams, you've never had that, right?
Knock on wood, I have not been kicked from a team, and I would love to go my whole career without being kicked from a team. It's one of those things, I mean, a lot of people have copped that end of the stick. I was just lucky enough that I haven't yet. I don't know. It's what it's come down to, whether it's just constantly trying to evolve and grow and adapt in the team environment. But yeah, I just haven't copped that yet.
Well, I guess two of the big ones that have gone through your career, obviously, and they're both from Renegades, is when Malta was removed and when Hatz was removed from the team. I just want to know, like, what are the conversations like prior to the point where they do get removed? How, is there a conversation among the team, or is it like, maybe the in-game leader, the manager, coach, whatever, having that conversation and deciding and then bringing it to the team? And then we'll get into the discussion around, like, how do people actually break the news to the players that are actually getting removed as well?
Yeah. With Malta, I think it was definitely something that was brewing a lot. And everyone could kind of feel it. I think he felt it as well. It was one of those things. It was kind of brewing outside the server a little bit. There was definitely just kind of like personality clashes and differing visions that would cause for tough conversations. And Liam's actually quite good with confrontation, which a lot of us weren't. He was definitely always up for that like tough conversation to have, and it kind of made it like really hard because that's not how everyone operated, and you have to know how people kind of operate with that. And I think by the end of it, I remember we did it at after a boot camp or after an event where we went back to the boot camp place, and we were all in the room together, and we called for a team discussion, and Liam pretty much knew straight away what was happening, which it was tough, it was hard, and but I think after that, it almost felt like everyone in the room's kind of shoulders were like lifted. I think even for him, he probably felt some relief because that's the nature of this job as well. Is there's not like a whole lot of job security. It's performance based, like really hardcore performance based. And that one was definitely, probably more expected from the team than when I think Hatz got kicked. Uh, I honestly wasn't like too a part of the discussions. I think when Jordan was kicked, it seemed like that's how it can kind of be when it's like people get along so well together. You know what I mean? And it's really hard to like kind of have everyone, clued in about what's going on, and we're going to remove this player and stuff like that. I think I knew before it was going to happen, but leading up to it, I was, not completely in the know at the time, I think. But it just definitely felt like we'd stagnated. Something needed to change, and there was an opportunity for like a young talent in Oz, which we haven't. I feel like we haven't properly had like a young talent for so long, like Vexite, which is crazy. It felt like all the young talent was already in Grayhound, like back then when we were like 17, 18. We'd all grown up to be like 23, 24, and we were in that Greyhound team. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
Vexite was that next player.
Well, I have a couple of questions on that. Like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but sometimes you get the best content from tangents. So, first of all, what is it actually that makes Vexite different to play with, or to sort of be that player which you say, you want to pick up into a team like Greyhound? Because, again, you can think of any number of players throughout the history of ANZ CS that people were like, yeah, this player's sick, this player's good, they could be awesome. But if you and obviously your team and whatever have decided, okay, Vexite is the guy, what is it actually that makes him different to literally anybody else, right?
I think from the outside, what kind of saw was like obviously he was consistently doming, like that was apparent, but he also had that like insane high skill ceiling, like you would see. I think he dropped like 40 or like high 30s against us once on Vertigo to carry like his team at the time to a victory against us when we were Renegades or Greyhound. And you could just kind of feel it. You feel it when you're playing against players that they're better. They're not like making really, really silly decisions. They're using the U2 well, and they're taking smart duels. They're not just like running at you and relying on their aim. And now that we've played with him, we kind of see, he's a very vocal young player. He's got a lot of confidence and he's sharp. He's so sure of himself, which I think not many players are. They're not as sure of themselves as they should be. And he definitely kind of like oozes that energy, which is really, really good.
One other question I had was, and I remember this being a thing maybe like a couple of years ago. It was never a big talking point, but I remember like some of the tier 2 or 3 players sort of saying like, oh, we can't get into a good team because we're kind of being gate kept out by the boys club or whatever, like that sort of situation is. I don't know if that was necessarily aimed at Greyhound per se, but just generally speaking, I remember there was, and this is the same thing that happens with casters and talent as well. It happens in everything. But what would you say to those kind of players that think like, oh, there's a gatekeep type situation going on? Is there ever a world where, Greyhound at this point is like, yeah, we're not going to pick up a new player because we just want to pick up someone who's been around for 5 years or something?
We always want to be the best, and we want to have the best talent in a team. That's just how it is. I mean, I think Vexite is like the perfect example. Nobody knew him. Nobody had talked to him. We'd just play FPL and he was in the games. Like that was it. If he can join like our team out of nowhere, like anyone can. Like all this gatekeep shit is just like kind of just a sad excuse, I think. As like people just would rather pin it on that rather than say that they're not good enough, because Vexite was the perfect example of us picking up a player who was good enough that we didn't know, and he just meshed well with us in the end. It was perfect.
Yep. All right, and one thing as well before we move on from this whole team kicking, removing sort of discussion. Obviously, Hatz was removed, and then you get the news that you have to sort of play with him at Dreamhack Melbourne, the first Dreamhack Melbourne. Vexite wasn't able to play because of roster locks or whatever, this or that. So what was that kind of situation like? Because obviously you've gone through the whole negative, like down mental or whatever of having to remove Hatz, and he's probably feeling like shit, and you guys are feeling like shit, and then it's like, hey, you want to play on our teams? I mean, you kind of spun it like one last ride, right? Which was kind of cool in a way, but it must not have been like a great environment still.
No, it actually was. We knew it was like we'd played together for so long. Everyone was such good friends, and it was also a good opportunity for him to have that last big event as well. Not just for us, but like, when you get removed from a roster, you're constantly thinking like what your next options are and what's happening. Like, where do you go from here? So, I mean, personally, if I was kicked and I got that opportunity, I would love to jump at it and I'd love to play that because I think you just have so much more fun. And it was also really shit for Vexite. Vexite was so excited, so hungry to play, and then instantly had to sit in the crowd and watch his future team play against all these teams when he feels like he should have been up there. But it did make sense. We qualified with Jordan at the time, and I'm glad he got to experience that because it was a cool event and we hadn't had a proper stage event like that in ages. So it was a good, like, I guess, send off.
Yeah, I feel like I remember him playing pretty well as well. Like, I think if you would look at his numbers going into that event, you're like, okay, he was kind of the lowest rated on Grayhound and this and that. It makes sense that he was removed. But now that I'm looking back, he was 0.94 for the event, which is not too bad. But anyway, whatever. I feel like I remember him like having a good map or two where you were like, he's playing like free, doesn't give a shit anymore. Like, it's whatever.
Yeah, definitely would have had that. Like, oh fuck it, let's have some fun. I'm gonna swing this guy, like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, either way, obviously we move on from that. And one of the other sort of memorable moments, I would say, from you, and this kind of ties in with the whole, loudest AWPer, like this kind of guy, he makes lots of noise, he's a screamer. Fuck your pickems, right? So this was a big one that I feel like kind of, people continue to bring up to this day. But was the IEM Rio 2022 major, I think, was the one where everyone was like, yeah, Grayhound is literally not going to get a map, and you were like, how many people were? What was the number, or do you even remember? It felt like the world was against Grayhound, where everyone predicted you to go 0-3.
Everyone was saying we're 0-3 because I still don't like. Yeah, we probably didn't have the greatest results leading into it, but everyone just kept saying, yeah, Grayhound easy 0-3. They always go 0-3, and I was like thinking about it. Hang on, no, we went 0-3 once. We only went 0-3 once, and yeah, sure, we went 1-3. The other one almost 2-3. But we only went 0-3 once before that, and everyone kept spinning it. Even to this day, they think we've went 0-3 like 3 out of 3 majors for some reason. And every analyst, every fan, everyone was just shitting on us, and it was like, fuck it, let's just play.
What is it? Does it impact the team when, the community sentiment is against you?
Not really. I can only speak for me, but like even just feeling it out with the other boys, like nobody really cares. It just builds a bigger underdog story, and you kind of have that plot armor probably, where it's like, yeah, we probably have that in the arsenal a little bit more, and we got that as backup. There's less pressure, obviously. I mean, you still have to beat these teams at the end of the day that are feeling confident. Like that's just how it is. But like, we definitely don't let it affect us in the server. No way.
Was there a little bit of indication? Obviously, I imagine there was, given the fact that you scream "fuck your pickems." But when you win that one game, and you're like, yeah, we actually did fuck over like the vast majority of the community. Like we showed them.
Yeah, it was just, it was such a good feeling. It's not even like something I'd planned to say either. It just, we just won, and it was just like, it just felt fucking good. And I was like, yeah, fuck everyone, fuck all you who just said like we were gonna get pounded. We came back and we beat C9. Like just felt good.
Good stuff. And obviously a very, very memorable moment for a lot of the Australian fans as well, especially, I feel like. So
yeah,
everyone's latched onto that and kind of run with it. But another thing that was kind of a bit weird about this whole period was obviously Renegades as an organization seemed to sort of be winding down, and then you had the Order transition, and you guys were with Order for like I can't even remember. It was like 2 or 3 events. It's like barely even registers at all, and
weird,
probably a lot of people don't even realize that period even occurred, where Renegades went to order, and then obviously you went on to be in Grayhound. But from the conversations that I've had, it seemed like you guys kind of knew for a while that you were going to be transitioning to order. Like even at that major that you were playing prior to that transition, I think at least Hatz said he seemed to sort of know that this was coming. So what was it kind of like playing in that environment?
I mean, it wasn't bad. You know, we knew that was coming, but we knew we were landing on our feet with going to order. We just heard, I think we were being sold at the time, and that's not as scary as hearing you're getting dropped. You know what I mean? Because if you're getting dropped, then you have no income.
Yep.
You have nothing. You have to start searching for the options. But hearing we were getting sold and we had a couple of people interested, that was like, it was whatever. As long as we had each other like to play CS with, we didn't really care where we landed, unless it was like obviously a terrible organization or whatever. But we were fine. We didn't let it affect us in the server. Yeah, I think what was a bigger shock was hearing about order going under. That really kind of was scary and the most inconvenient time possible. It just could not have been worse.
I remember one of the best things that came out of that, I felt, was when Inns made that tweet with like I've lost my job. Have you seen that meme? I thought that was
I'm panicking.
I'm panicking. It's like, no, don't worry. It's like, oh, I can't. I've lost my job or some shit. And it's like, that was perfect. But like, obviously, you know, if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry. Really, is kind of the mentality at that point. So yeah, what was all that like? Because again, you know, I think everyone in ANZ, that order situation was a bit of a shock, a bit crazy. But especially for you guys who have just joined the organization, you're feeling good. Like Gomez is in there obviously as a fairly tenured person within the Counter-Strike space, so you guys probably assume you're going to be, you know, taken care of as well by him and by the organization, and then it's just like boom, there you go. Just prior to, I think, Dreamhack Melbourne, it's like you're gone. So I assume you would have been on a salary in order. That's no longer a thing then. You go into Grayhound potentially and have to have that conversation again. And so, yeah, just talk me through that whole process.
Yeah, it was cooked. It was so cooked. And it definitely, like, after it all happened, it definitely sounded like the people, some of the people in order, like the high-ups, whatever, like the real high-ups, knew that it was happening for a little bit. And we were just obviously blindly in the dark, you know. And we found out when we were all at the house about to play literally the first open qualifier, the first game of the major qualifier, which is the biggest event of the year. And it was just chaotic. We were like kind of just prepping in the morning, whatever. And then Will came down and just told us everything. And we're like, what the fuck do you mean? We just signed Vexite. We just signed to this organization. If we qualify for the major, they're going to make money for it. Like, why is it in their interest? We didn't understand it at all. And yeah, I don't know how we managed to just keep playing like nothing was happening. I think we knew at the time, like, we have to perform now, because if we don't, we're even more fucked than what's just happened to us. And it ended up being good. Will, you know, took it as the opportunity it was, and that's when he revived Grayhound, and it was a good chance and a good, you know, way for it to pan out. It couldn't have been better for us after it ended up being so fucked.
Yeah, I think actually in hindsight, almost people in ANZ were kind of not happy to see it happen, but obviously they were like, when this, like, life's giving us lemons, right? Let's make lemonade. Everyone was like, Grayhound should come back, right? And then Grayhound came back, and everyone was like, fuck yeah, Grayhound's back. Yeah. Obviously such a beloved organization within ANZ CS, so I think people in general were pretty happy to kind of see that. Yeah. But I think we can, like, talk about Grayhound and this sort of 2022, 2023 era all kind of together, because, you know, as sad as it is to say, I don't think that there's been like a massive breakout result necessarily to like focus on or to highlight. So I kind of want to talk about it more generally. And I think, you know, first of all, we'll touch on the fact that you guys are still easily the top team in ANZ, and without having played against teams in Asia since the last Asia RMR, it's fair to say that you're still up there, at least as far as Asia is concerned. You know, obviously, if there was an RMR today, things might be different, but we don't necessarily know that. So I would say you're still within. If I would have to make a power ranking, right, like you've got yourselves, you've got Tyloo, you've got Linvision, I would say it's probably the top 3. Mongols, top 4. And then of those 4, you know, obviously 2 would qualify to a major, in my opinion. Yeah. But, you know, I think generally speaking, like internationally, the results have stagnated. Is that fair to say? Like, what is the situation with Grayhound at the moment? Is there something wrong? Is it just it's not coming together? It's not working, or what is the situation right now?
It's almost like at times performance anxiety. It feels like, you know what I mean? We can have good boot camps, we can have bad boot camps. It just comes down to how we perform on the day. I think at this point in time, I can't disclose, but we're working on a coach, and that should be coming out really soon, which is really fun and exciting. But that is definitely, you know, really exciting for us, and definitely feels like it's going to pull us out of this rut. Because I mean, people think we're like so complacent and happy with where we are, just being a top team in Oz, and it's just not the case. Like, it's very fucking hard and sad for us to go spend time in Europe practicing all these teams and feel like you're up there and you're spending time away from family, everything, and then you go to these events and you lose. Like, it sucks. You know, we're not happy with these results that we've been getting. So that's why I think with this coach coming in, it should kick us into gear and spark it back up. You know what I mean? Because I hope people don't think that we are complacent, because we're not. We're fucking actually. We do work our asses off when we go away, and we're wanting to be like, you know, the team representing Oz as much as teams, as much as people want us to be. We want to be putting Oz like on the map properly and be competing with all these teams.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's talk about that community perception or versus the internal perception. And I mean, how do you guys deal with that pressure? Like, do you almost feel like maybe you put more pressure on yourselves than you should? And also, I think the other aspect of that is that, like, in a sense, especially now, the fact that obviously 100 Thieves / Renegades / that Vox, you know, core into that position of number one ANZ team is gone now. Like, you guys are the number one ANZ team. You are the hope of the region, of our country, and even, you know, of New Zealand as well, presumably. Especially at events that are like local, right? Like you talk about that Dreamhack Melbourne where you guys almost beat BNE and would have been in the grand final potentially, and IEM Sydney, which has just rolled around. You have this not weight of a nation necessarily on you, but that is the way that it could be spun. So how do you guys sort of deal with that? Is that even a thing?
I don't think anymore. Obviously, looking at not anymore, but at this point in time, I think teams don't have that expectation for us to go and make these runs that 100 Thieves would. I think we just have to showcase and have this slight incline of events for people to be going like, shit, all right, Greyhound are definitely, you know, let's fucking go, the boys, like all that stuff as much as they used to. We just need to like have 2-3 good events in a row for everyone to, I think, you know, have that expectation of us more so, because we don't feel the weight of people like relying so heavily on us to do crazy and all that stuff. We want to do well. That's like we always want to do well.
Yeah. So look, you've already talked about the coaching situation, but, you know, what changes would the team make, or what have you guys even tried? Because I know you guys have been sort of playing around with the roles a little bit over the last sort of 12 months or so. You're obviously still kind of trying to experiment and trying to find the right mix. But it seems like, at least as a core, as 5, and, you know, obviously Mr. Grayhound as well, the situation with him and the team and stuff like that, it seems like you feel like you've found the right mix of players, or that you don't feel as though there's like an upgrade necessarily elsewhere. But you still sort of trying. So what changes are you kind of making, or what are you looking into to potentially sort of make those improvements?
I think it's just the way we play right now. I think we're working heavily on our CT sides, and I think that's what the coach will help a lot with, having that extra set of eyes. We did, like, obviously when we got rid of David Kingfisher a while ago now, we had that really good event at Pro League where we beat Nip. We should have beat Payne. We beat another team. I can't remember who. We felt like, oh, okay, this is the system we should be having. Everyone's taking on more responsibility because no coach, and then it kind of stagnated. But now that we're bringing back a coach, we realize like how important it is to have that extra set of eyes to be able to point out shit, point out what's wrong, and also just give input from, like, you know, the eyes in the sky, pretty much, because it gets really hard. And I think as players as well, you can't just be constantly calling out your teammates. It's not the environment that it should be. You obviously you got to call out your friends and teammates when it's really necessary, but it should not always be coming from teammates. And I think that's what a coach brings that's so important, and especially a coach with playing experience. It's really important. So I think that is like why we're all so excited and also motivated right now, because we know this is a really good opportunity coming up to, you know, get back on the map and get put the results up that we know we can. We just need to
Mm.
fucking perform, and that's I think we're all really excited for that.
Well, on that topic, what do you think it takes to compete at that level that the general someone who has never played at an international event, right? They're just a decent CS player that they play locally. What do you think what's the difference that it takes to go and play overseas and to sort of compete? Because, I think people look at Grayhound and especially at the moment go, oh yeah, we could do better if we got those opportunities, blah, 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 this and that. But what don't those people understand?
Well, I think the first thing those people don't understand is that, like, first of all, like, people who are like thinking we're gatekeeping all these international opportunities is just the silliest argument. I think it's like, okay, you want these opportunities, fucking beat us. Like, it's as simple as that. You have the opportunities to qualify, but you're not beating the team to get there. Yeah, sure, we're winning these stuff and we're going over and we're not putting up the results we want to put up, but we're qualifying for these events. I think these like players and all that, when they go overseas, they'll realize like how good these teams and players are, how good their protocols are, and like not just always constantly thinking throughout the round, but understanding every piece of util and what teams are doing when they like give you that information. You know what I mean? I think, I think just where the game is now is there's so many protocols and reactions. There's so much depth to CS than there was, say, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure it's much harder now to be a tier 1 team or to even compete on the tier 1 level than what it was like, as you say, 5-6 years ago. You could go over, you could get a lot of work done. And I mean, obviously, as the entire ecosystem levels up, then so too do you guys and the local teams as well, which I don't know, maybe that hasn't quite happened as much domestically, but I want to talk about that in a little second. The final sort of topic I wanted to talk about here with Grayhound, just in general, was what happens if Grayhound doesn't qualify for the next major, for example, right? Because obviously you guys are with Grayhound, the organization, but like it is an organization, but it's not an organization, but it is an organization. I mean, from what I hear, you guys are salaried, but I assume a lot of your income is coming through from sticker money. So what happens to the team if you don't qualify for the major? Does it still continue?
I mean, that decision's probably not up to us. It's the same as anything. It's all performance based. It might. It's been the same as every other major. If we don't make the major, what happens? Nobody knows. You know what I mean? It could be a tough conversation. It could be back to the drawing board. We don't know. We have to just perform when we need to perform, and we need to just make sure we stay on top. I think it's as simple as that, and that's what I think. That's just so important. Is you just have to perform.
Fair enough. Okay, so on the topic of AUCS, just generally then, obviously every time you guys go overseas and then you come back, we hear this conversation around like bad scrims, no practice, this and that. I mean, realistically, like you've got Vertex and Rooster, but from what I hear as well, Rooster's not exactly the greatest of scrim partners sometimes. So, what is that like at the moment compared to maybe what it was 4 or 5 years ago? Because even people that I've spoken to have sort of mentioned like, you would look for scrims on any given night on, in 2015, 2016, you'd find 10 potential opportunities, but now it's kind of like there's nothing.
I don't know what's happened. I actually just don't understand because I'm seeing all these teams play fucking ANZ champs and I'm seeing them play these events and I'm like, okay, it's just difficult, like we are sitting there and scrimming Vertex and Rooster like five nights a week. We scrimmed one other team once and like that's it. Obviously we need competition who's properly testing us and punishing stuff. Sometimes we do like play lower level teams and they just are doing silly stuff or they're not even properly playing, it feels like. They're just kind of pugging. It's just grim, I don't know. And it's really sad to see where I guess the state of Oz is at the moment. I don't know how to fix it or what it is, whether it's more funding and more organizations entering the scene to give these people more time to commit to the game. But we need more people to be scrimming. We need more people to practice. It's just grim right now.
Do you think there's a world where maybe teams just inherently think, okay, well, we're not going to get a scrim with Grayhound. We're not even going to try?
No, I don't think so. I think there was a team that didn't want to scrim us particularly because they said it's pointless. Like, you just damage our confidence. Like when we scrim you, and I don't really understand that perspective. I think like if I could scrim phase 5 times a week, I would scrim phase 5 times a week. I don't care if I'm getting fucking pounded 28-2 or 22-2, whatever it is. Like I think you play. You know what I mean? Like That's how you're going to get better, is by playing better competition.
On the other side of the coin, though, is there any value for you guys if you scrim that team? Does that make sense? Like,
But it's probably better than just not scrimming and sitting there and then being like, all right, we've done our theory. We could scrim this team, or we could get off the PC, or we could play Premier against a 5-stack of cheaters. Like, you know what I mean? It's probably better to just play.
is there nights where you guys are like not able to find a scrim, and then it's like, all right, well, we'll do more theory, and it's like at a certain point, how much theory is too much theory?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it gets pointless. Like, you're just sitting there having conversations of like one PC util, and it's like, okay, we should probably call it there. Just save some brain power for anything else. But yeah, there's definitely times where we can't find a scrim for the day because we didn't book Vertex or Rooster in advance, and they've got like a scrim with each other, or they're scrimming one of the lower level teams.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to talk about IEM Sydney just for a second here. I mean, I don't think there's too much to touch on, but the one specific that I wanted to sort of highlight was that game that you played on Anubis right toward the back end there, where you obviously popped off and you had a really great game. But I kind of want to know, like, what is it actually that allows you as an individual, as a player, to have a game like that as opposed to just, you know, having kind of a middling or even average or even poor performance? Like, what's the difference? Is it just you're feeling it? Like, because it seemed like you could do no wrong in that game. It didn't matter where you peaked, what side of the map you were playing on, whether you were on T or CT, you were kind of farming. But like, why can you do that on one game and then on the next game it just nothing happens, nothing comes together?
Yeah, I think that might be what separates like the best players from, like, you know, all the other players. I think is they're able to do that consistently rather than have to get in that state. That's kind of like the state of being in like the flow state where you're just feeling it and you know exactly what's happening. Your brain is just working at the perfect point and you just feel comfortable. You feel confident. You're not going to miss a shot. So you go for more shots and then you keep hitting those shots. Like, it's kind of like an endless cycle. And I think that's pretty much called the flow state. And it's very hard to, you know, tap into that and play like that consistently.
So I guess the players that are able to consistently find that are the ones that, you know, you see as the best in the world.
I think so. I think that's
Simples,
what makes Brokey, Zawu, is they're able to replicate that so consistently.
Okay, interesting. I want to talk to you about CS2 as well, because obviously that's the sort of hot topic at the moment that's been going around, and you're one of the players in the world that has had the most experience now with Counter-Strike 2 after playing IEM Sydney. But first question obviously was like, how did it feel playing on LAN compared to online? I've heard it's a little bit better.
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit better. You know, LAN's always going to be better than online. Definitely didn't feel night and day, but I don't know. It's people need to stop painting such a negative picture about CS2 because that's definitely not going to help. It's not going to help with viewership. It's not going to help with fans getting involved or bringing in new players. We have to remember like how much Valve has updated the game from when it was first in beta. Like, I think people have forgot how cooked it was when it first came out to where it's at now. Like, it is a lot better. They obviously need to fine tune some other things, fix some sub tick, all that bullshit, and then get on top of cheaters in Premier. But it's already come a long way, and I'm excited to see like, you know, what keeps coming out because it is feeling more fresh and kind of has reignited like grinding for pugs again, and trying to, you know, get comfortable and confident with all your aim jewels again.
So generally speaking, you're finding it okay, I guess? Seems to be the sentiment.
I am. I'm enjoying it.
What about AWPing specifically, right? Because there's obviously been a lot of conversations around AWPing being a little bit harder, not only because of the mechanics of the game and the sub-tick system and stuff like that, but also like there's less rounds in the game now. So is it harder to... Have you found yourself like sometimes just going, oh, I can't really afford to go for the AWP here. I just have to kind of go for the rifle, keep the money safe? Or, you know, have you had less time with the AWP? And when you have had the AWP, has it been harder to make work? Is basically the question.
Yeah, I think for me right now, like the AWP is really hard to just sit there static and hold lines. Like, it definitely feels like swinging and stuff like that. You have a little bit of an advantage, and not every shot is connecting right now. That's why I feel more comfortable and confident kind of pivoting around and then going for like a scope on a line and then kind of moving around. And yeah, I think the economy kind of does need to change. But as an AWPer, you have to be willing to, like, when everyone's getting those deagle rounds and all those deagle armor and like a nade, whatever, you can never get those. You never really get those rounds unless somebody else is saving money for you, or else you're never going to get an AWP. So it hasn't changed too much in that regard. Obviously, there's just more weight on those buy rounds. And yeah, you just have to keep your economy a little bit more in check.
Yeah.
That's it.
So with regard to the way that you play when you have the AWP in hand, I've kind of felt like I've seen this now in Counter-Strike 2 from a couple of AWPers that they're being like a little bit more aggressive with their, or not necessarily aggressive with their peaks, but they're being a bit more mobile, like you sort of mentioned there. Do you think that kind of ties into your natural play style a little bit? Because I've always seen you as someone who likes to play this very mobile, I'm jumping around the corner, I'm taking an aggressive peak kind of style when you're feeling it. And obviously, if that is now kind of the way that the game almost leans as an AWPing play style, is that benefiting you at all?
I think it will eventually. Yeah, there's a lot that comes with that play style because obviously, if you're a mobile AWPer, you can't just focus on yourself so much. You have to consider where you're positioning yourself and where you're pushing your teammates if you're running around constantly, because your teammates have to play off you and you have to play off them. You can't just be, going wherever the fuck you please and not saying anything. You have to do what makes sense for the whole team and round layout. So it's definitely making me more vocal and forcing me to grow in other places that I haven't, completely gotten comfortable with. So it's fun learning all that. And I think, yeah, over time, like that style definitely suits me more than sitting on a line for 35 to 40 seconds.
For sure, for sure. I want to start wrapping it up then, but a couple more questions before we close it down. What do you have like a favorite series that you've ever played in your entire career that you can think of off the top of your head?
A favorite series? Jeez.
Or map?
I think one of the most, exciting series. I don't know. That's such a loaded and difficult question. There's just like highlights, like that B&E one. Obviously, it slipped. That was a lot of fun and felt like having the crowd in front of us. All of that was just an amazing experience. I think when we came back from Tyloo 13-2 down on Vertigo, that was an amazing run from us as well. And then there's other games and other moments like against Rare Atom being down 15-13 and then winning a stupid 1v1 clutch on 1 HP. Shit like that. It's not just like a whole series, but it's like moments in those series that make them so special and so crazy. I think.
That's interesting. That because like I almost feel like how like when people say, oh, when you die, you get like all your best memories flash before your eyes, and that kind of, it's like almost like that with your career. It's like that one time I won the 1v1 against Advent at the Asia RMR to qualify for the major or stuff like that. And, yeah. Rather than just like one big long series or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough. I think that's a good answer for that one. Who's your favorite teammate of all time? Because we've always talked about the bromance with Liazz, but then you've sort of mentioned Ins a couple times. So is it between those two?
Yeah, it is. It has to be between those two. But then also like someone that people might not expect, but Emag was so much fun to play with. He's the funniest dude, and he had such a good environment, and yeah, he just brought a lot to the table in that regard. But for me, it's definitely between Ince and Liazz. I couldn't even give it to him.
Okay.
Like I can't pick. I feel like
we'll call it a draw. Who's one player that you wish you'd been able to play with, but you haven't? And I'm not really talking about like. Don't go like super outlandish with this one. Be like realistic. So don't say like simple or fucking something like that. But
I could play with simple probably. But,
yeah. Could you role clash? Like come on.
Yeah, that makes sense actually too. I've been lucky enough to be able to play with everyone in Australia. I think that's just how it is in Australia. If you're at the top, you're gonna get that opportunity to play with all the talent. But I think a player I never really got to play with that I would have enjoyed would be Chuch. Because I know outside the game, I've had some fun conversations and I've got to hang with him a little bit, and he's a funny dude. But I think it sounded like inside the server, he was also quite funny, and I think he would be an enjoyable teammate.
Interesting. All right, who's a player to watch in AUCS that we don't talk about that much? So maybe someone that's not inside the top 3.
Come up because right now it's rough. I think we haven't had any up and comers come up for a while. I
mean, you would say that as one of the gatekeepers of the scene, so
yeah, it's in my best interest to say that. This is probably a bit of a weird player, but somebody I've felt when I've played against who's really fucking sharp, and I would like to actually see more of them is Drox. Like he's not like one of the top ANZ champs players, but he's definitely felt really sharp and quite interesting when I've played against him. So I think seeing more of him, and then look if. Maybe even a player. It's always interesting. Craxy T. Every time I've played against him, whether it's a pug or FPL, I've never fucking beat him. And I'd like to see more of how they go in competition and with teammates.
Well, I think both of them in particular have kind of been kicking around for a little bit now, so they seem to be doing it the right way, if that makes sense. We'll see how things go for them in CS2. And for you specifically, future goals like beyond the game, what happens after CS? Do you want to stay in what happens after CS as a player? What happens then? Do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a caster, analyst? Do you want to just completely leave CS? Where would you see yourself when this is done?
I think I want to stay involved, whether it be, trying out an opportunity on the desk, stuff like that, or even, going into more of a coaching role and trying to help teams. I would definitely be interested in that. I think the one thing is trying not to, spend almost 6 months of the year away from family and stuff like that, because we've definitely had years, time away over the years like that. Because obviously I did spend a lot of time away, and I think I'd like to just kind of plant myself just for a little bit and then get involved in that regard. I think I can bring a lot, and I'd like to learn that side, I think.
How was that experience at IEM Sydney when you were doing the analyst desk? Because I heard from someone, I can't remember who it was, but they said that you were like, oh man, I couldn't really get a word in because, obviously the desk just bounces back and forth sort of thing.
Yeah, I was like, it was so much fun, and they were really good with how they had me on the desk. They were definitely asking me questions because they knew. I was so surprised when I got to talk on the desk how they bounce off each other. And I didn't want to talk over anyone, even if I had a point to make, because they kind of they're really good at building on each other and doing that. Whereas I was struggling to do that. So when they would get me involved, they would ask me a question. And it was really cool, and it was a lot of fun. And I don't think I fumbled too much. So that was cool. It was such a nice opportunity, and get to do it in front of the crowd. It was insane.
There you go. Maybe something for the future. And just to finally close out the conversation, why do you scream so much?
Someone's got to do it. Somebody's got to bring the fire and, yell at the opponents. I don't think it's in everyone's nature in my team to do it, but I think it's just, you're given this opportunity to play this level of Counter-Strike against all these talented people. You may as well just have some fun with it and not just treat it as such as a job. You may as well not just sit there like you're fucking doing whatever. I want to get loud and I want to feel all the emotions and have fun with it.
Hey guys, just at the end of this video, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Jean, who is my first supporter on buymeacoffee.com. If you'd also like to support me financially or any of my content, make sure to check out the link. It is in the description box below.